World Cup 2021 goes on, folks. We have lost 4 teams. The quarterfinalists are now in place, but we'll go through the games that were played at the weekend. Apologies, this video is a day late, but Monday was a public holiday in New Zealand, so spent some time out with the family. But I did manage to go to the games on the Sunday, which was pretty cool. And I've caught up on the action across the board. The first one with the Aussies and the Welsh, both these teams will be going through to the quarterfinals. 13-7, pretty close game. I think that was on paper always going to be one of the closest games of the round. And man, it was a real arm wrestle. I mean, the First Nations jersey that the Aussie girls were wearing, pretty slick. I do always like those First Nations jerseys, to be honest. They scored an early try and the Welsh replied like on 22 minutes, but then not much doing in terms of points on the board. It was basically a big arm wrestle. A couple of Aussie penalties, enough for the win. So, really, really tight game. Proper test match, that one. Kind of, I guess, what you expect when two teams are trying to finish as high as they can in terms of where they're going to finish for the quarterfinals. I mean, the Aussies had the majority of the ball, but Wales' tackling percentage was like 89%, so they're just shutting the Aussies down, eh? Alex Callender had 28 from 30 tackles, which is a phenomenal shift. Huge from the number 7 for Wales. Tarita, the winger, continues to impress for Australia. Didn't get on the board this time, but 3 defenders beaten 67 metres. Not a bad shift. Tough ask for both of these sides in their quarterfinals, though, with the Aussies lining up England and Wales get a rematch against the Black Ferns, who gave them a bit of a hiding the last time they played. So, we'll see how both teams go, but both teams progress, so another week. Speaking of the Black Ferns, 57-0 over the Scots, a bit of a hiding. Interestingly, this is one of the games that I watched the least amount of because I knew this one was going to be a hiding. So, despite the fact that it's my team, I wasn't quite as invested in it. 1 minute and 39 seconds, Renee Holmes goes over for the first of many Black Ferns tries. It wasn't just the backs, though, like Michaeli too continues to impress in the loose. Real power for her try, but I mean 45-0 at half time. If anything, I guess you would say at least the second half was a bit closer because only 57-0 is the final score after 45-0 at half time. Certainly the pace has slowed down a lot. One of the calls for one of the Black Ferns tries was pretty dodgy. It seemed pretty forward, although I'm always a little bit hesitant because the camera angles we get can be deceptive. The ref seemed pretty happy that she'd seen it as flat and she didn't see enough from the TV camera to overturn it. From the TV camera, I thought it looked blatantly forward, but I mean, sometimes, the way the TV cameras are positioned, you can literally see two different things from two different angles, right? Sometimes it can look forward, sometimes it can look flat just from different angles. It's the same pass, but did look pretty forward. I mean, it didn't make a difference, 57-0, but still, talking point if nothing else. Possession was like 70-20 or 70-30. So the Black Ferns pretty dominant. Scotland's tackling percentage, 75%, was never going to get the job done. 11 clean breaks to 4. Renee Whitcliffe, the winger, 3 clean breaks, 6 defenders beaten, 138 metres. Not a bad shift. Emma Wassell continues to have a good tournament, but her tournament is over. But 25 out of 26 tackles. The lock, proper shift for the Scots. But with that result, the Scots are out. And it's a pity they weren't able to get on the board because nobody likes to see a team get nilled. But they certainly weren't the only team to get nilled this weekend. France kept the Fijians scoreless, 44 points to 0. The Fijians are another team that goes home after this result. I mean, France, again, did get on the board pretty early. Their maul got them close. They got it to the backs. They did get on the board early, but it took like half an hour for them to get their second one. So, of all the teams that didn't make it, I've been really kind of pleased by Fiji in this tournament. Like, maybe not across the course of 80 minutes, but for periods of these games, are well and truly able to be competitive. And as they get more game time, more professional, then they will certainly be more competitive for sure. But 20 points to 0 at half time, so it's kind of an even split, unlike the Black Ferns game with the French scoring. It just kind of continues to truck along at a steady pace. The number 8, Gros, awesome from the back of the scrum, sets one up and gets one herself. So yeah, and Fiji, unfortunate double yellow card means a red card to finish the game. But I mean, yeah, 492 run meters to 337 shows that the Fijians, had a bit of ball, but 7 clean breaks to 1, 10 mauls to 0 shows the difference in the sides. And also the tackling, man. The French 81 is not that flash, but 60% for the Fijians is just not going to fly. Bouillard gets 72 meters, gets a try from the back in the French side. The left winger, Naikore, gets like 7 defenders beaten, so tough customer to bring down. But unfortunately, likewise with the Scots, the Fijians unable to score any points. France play Italy in their quarterfinal. Speaking of Italy, they beat Japan 21 points to 8. French await the Italians, and it's the first time ever the Italians make a quarterfinal. The men's team's never managed it, but the women's team get it done. So knockout stages await them. 21 points to 8 winners over Japan. I saw the second half of this game live, and because it's 3 games in a row at the stadium, so I missed the start of the game because it was kind of started just after lunchtime. But yeah, it seems like from what I missed, I went back and watched the highlights. Like Italy scored early, Japan hit back, and then that was just the arm wrestle. And that's the way I saw it for most of the game itself. Although the Italians did seem to be the more likely of the two teams to kind of open up. And I guess that's kind of how it proved, right? Like, I mean, they exchanged some penalties, but the Italian pressure starts to mount. They get a couple of penalties to make it like a 6-point lead. So all but done and dusted. And then the final try in 78 minutes just seals the game. Japanese line-out not great. Italians discipline let them down a wee bit. Muzzo, the right winger, though, 6 defenders beaten, 3 clean breaks, pretty tidy. Nagata, the number 7 for Japan, 25 out of 27 tackles, also a huge shift. Like, defensively, sometimes the Japanese were just under the pump and able to clear or win a penalty or whatever. So, yeah, pleasing stuff from the Italians. They were celebrating with the fans in front of me for ages. The security guy could not move them along. He was like, please move, please move, please move. But they were too busy having a blast. So good to see. I'm sure it was a fire evacuation risk somehow because they were kind of partly blocking a path with the big crowd that was gathered around them. But nah, I'm pretty pleased for the Italians, man. So Japan on the other side that goes home. And as I said, for the Italians, France awaits. That's probably going to be the second best of the quarterfinals, I reckon. I mean, I still think France will win that one, but it wouldn't be earth-shattering for the Italians to win. Whereas if Australia or Wales won their quarterfinals, I think that would genuinely be one of the biggest upsets, if not of just this tournament of decades. You know what I mean? Like, both those sides are huge underdogs, whereas France will still be favourites, but Italy, as I said, not to be written off, but underdogs nonetheless. Canada and the USA, I watched this one in full at the ground as well. I noticed there's a fair bit of, like, on the YouTube comments, like, why aren't there more fans at the ground? I did notice, because there's 3 games in a row, the fans come and go, for sure. There were a lot of Italian and probably even more Japanese fans at the first game. A lot of their fans left after their game. And towards the end of this game, the Canadian and American fans were kind of trickling in. And then as this game started, the Italians and the Japanese just kind of trickled out. Some stayed, but they trickled out. And then as the Canadians and the US were playing, the South Africans and the English were kind of trickling in. And at the end of the Canadian-US game, they kind of trickled out. So if everyone was there at the same time, I think the crowd would have looked more impressive. But a lot of people, including myself, did not stay for like all 380 minutes because it's a pretty long day, I guess, back-to-back games. But yeah, the Canadians and the US, 2 pretty lively crowds as well. I think there were more Canadians from my judging of it than Americans, but who knows. Tutosi, the hooker, her scoring run just goes on. The USA were under the pump in that first half, but they just kind of managed to keep themselves alive. Like 12-0 down, they score a try. When they were like 19-0 down, they had a try disallowed. Or 24-7 down, they scored a try just to keep themselves like not totally out of the game, but probably going to lose. Canadian set piece is still really good, although their tackling percentage was 74, the Canadians, which they won't be that happy about. The Americans were a little bit better with 80. But yeah, I do think the Canadians were pretty good value for their win, and I think they'll win their quarterfinal because guess who they're playing? They're playing each other. I guess one of the quirks of having a three-pool tournament is that there's a chance of teams rematching, like the Black Ferns and the Welsh. Canadians and Americans are literally going to play each other in the next game. So some standouts, both the midfielders, man. Kelter in the US midfield, 12, 2 clean breaks, 6 defenders beaten in a try. Not a bad shift. Alicia Corrigan, the 13 for Canada, 108 metres, beats 8 defenders, 3 clean breaks. Also pretty tidy. I do reckon that's the quarterfinal to watch next week, but I still think the Canadians will be pretty decent favourites. But if the Americans won, I think that would be the least surprising of the 4 quarterfinals. The last one, England and South Africa. I watched the start of this one and then kind of meandered out because I knew after the English scored a couple of tries, like this is probably only going to go one way. Although I do think the South African score of 0 is a little bit harsh. I think they were better value than that. But I mean, over the course of the 80, obviously South Africa were pretty well beaten. I mean, England's maul's just brutal. The hooker for England gets a hat-trick, which is pretty brutal. You see the English lock, Gallagher gets a hat-trick as well. Like, it's crazy stuff. But, I mean, 29-0 at half-time. That's actually not that bad from South Africa, seeing as they're certainly one of the emerging teams rather than the established team that is England. But obviously, second half, man. And I don't want to say it's just the English maul, but their maul is obviously brutal. But, I mean, they still got some bloody good hands to keep the ball alive, to keep themselves playing. So that's kind of pleasing from an English point of view. But, I mean, defenders beaten 36-27. Like I said, the South Africans weren't just totally trashed in this game. They did have some really nice moments. They would inevitably kind of like knock it on. But set-piece time's obviously a struggle. Penalties come from set-piece, so that was always going to be tough for South Africans. They tackle at 65%, which definitely got worse as the game went on. But England are only at 78% defensively, which is low. Like, so the South Africans did cause them some problems. I mean, Jess Breach, 4 clean breaks. She doesn't get any tries. Abby Dow, I think, gets the only try from a back from the English. Like, all their tries just come from forwards. I do feel like any team which can try to halt the English juggernaut up front will have a chance. I'm particularly thinking of the Black Ferns, but the way the draws work, I mean, the Black Ferns will be more worried about, obviously, Wales first up, but then France. But yeah, you need to stop those English forwards, which is way easier said than done. The South African number 8, what's in there? Hele? Like 5 defenders beaten, 54 metres, like just some big old carries, eh? So yeah, England take on Australia. Like I mentioned, they'll be massive favourites. Black Ferns, Scotland, Black Ferns, massive favourites. The other 2 quarterfinals are looking a wee bit tastier. And then I would be 100% not surprised to see Black Ferns up against France in a fortnight, and then likewise the Canadians taking on the English, but we will kind of have to wait and see. Funny things can happen at a World Cup, but I predicted all these results and I got half of them with the margin. So yeah, it's been relatively predictable thus far, but as we get into the business end, things should get a little bit tighter. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. What did you think of the games? And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.